Hello and welcome to the Powerless Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Benjamin Rose, who is a member of the indie pop group Cat in the Hurricane out of Madison, Wisconsin. I talked to Benjamin about their start in music, what got them to get involved in kind of joining a band or writing their own solo music, things of that nature. I know Benjamin from actually my time in church growing up, so we talk a little bit about that, the origins of where politics and social issues and the church and things that we grew up with in similar veins, how that all kind of developed to where we are now, which we're both in very different places than we were when we were growing up. We talk about their journey as a drag performer. We talk a little bit about that, where that came from as well, and the great things that come from that and the community behind it. It's just kind of a beautiful thing there. And also, as I kind of mentioned just a second ago, talk about the intricacies and the duality of someone like Benjamin, who is actually in seminary school, who is queer, who is a drag performer, and also essentially getting a master's degree in ministry. So we talk about a big host of things. I think this episode is pretty interesting. Not a whole lot of intersectional conversations I hear about all these things kind of mashed together. So it was really great to catch up with Benjamin. Hadn't talked to them in years, so it's just really cool, other than little things back and forth on social media, to actually have a conversation with them and really kind of pick their brain on their beliefs and also their journey in music. And of course, at the end, we also look at Benjamin's sort of super group that they would be in if they could put anybody in their band, which is something I've been doing with a lot of people that people seem to enjoy. So make sure to stick around at the end for that. And we'll also play a song from Cat in the Hurricane at the very end of this recording. So again, thanks to Benjamin for coming on. It was a really great conversation with them, and I just really hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get into the episode, just as a reminder, you can follow me on social media at The Powerless Pod, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Again, the last two I don't use as much, but you can still follow there for when things are posted. Make sure to reach out to me at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com. I always like to hear from people. I've gotten some great constructive feedback. Also been connected with people who just wanted to get on the show through that as well. So just make sure to reach out to me there. Before we get into the episode with Benjamin, I'm going to plug the same band I've been playing the last several episodes that you should check out. That there will be a clip right here before we get into the episode from the band Whole Heart, a metal band from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Their last EP they put out in 2022, Dreams That Die With You, my number one EP of last year. Just an absolutely fantastic, underrated band, from the riffs to the song structures to the lyrical content. It's a concept EP. You should definitely check that out. Listen to the first episode I did of this podcast with Alec, the guitarist of the band. We kind of dive into what that EP is all about. Just make sure to check out the band. Absolutely fantastic and underrated, and I just want to plug them each time before this episode in case we get a few more eyes on them and kind of grow their fan base a little bit. So before we get into the episode with Benjamin Rose, we're going to play a clip from Whole Heart, a metal band from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then we'll get into the episode. So thanks.
Forgive me, I will not surrender to defy or linger to witness this callous dreadful sin. I've been singing for too long, stuck with the empire train. Disconnect me, sever the bonds I've lived with for far too long.
So I am here on the Powerless Podcast with Benjamin Rose, who I know from way back, way back in the day, and also is part of the band Cat and the Hurricane, is a drag performer under the name INVERTIA. I've only read that in writing, so I'm saying that correctly, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, and also you've put out some solo music that at least on Bandcamp I can find a few things we can get into if I'm missing some things. I did go back and listen to them, and they were fantastic. I was really not pleasantly surprised, but it was very pleasant to listen to. I really enjoyed it. I had listened to Cat in the Hurricane before. I know you're out of Wisconsin. The whole band is out of Wisconsin.
Yep.
I know you've been a musician for quite a while. And I also, in case anybody's to know, I would know Benjamin from kind of like a growing up in like a sort of similar religious side of things that would be, in correlation with a few things as we get into the music. If you're open to talking about, I would love to talk about that as well.
Definitely.
First, to start off, after all my rambling right there, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Yeah, I was just working on some music stuff today, so I'm in that zone. Yeah, doing good. How are you?
Great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I'm happy we got to do this. It was a long day at work for me, but I'm really excited to get into this because there's a few things I've wanted to talk to you about. One, your band Cat and the Hurricane, that I know is a 3-piece band out of Madison, Wisconsin. Um, all of you have put out a couple of releases together. Seems like the band really does have. Oh, I don't know. In my opinion, it has a lot of music that connects really well while still having really good like pop sensibilities, still being original and everything in between. So, like I said before, I've known you a little bit from the past, but I really haven't talked to you in over a decade now. What got you kind of leading up into this band and your own solo music? What got you started from whether it was playing music in church or playing, cover stuff or, learning something from YouTube, in your parents' living room or
Right.
whatever else? Like, what got you from that to starting to do your own music and starting being in this band and doing your solo stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was an interesting trajectory because I definitely learned how to play music, especially how to play music with other people through church and like being on worship bands and stuff. So that was very much where I came up. Like I took piano lessons with a woman that I knew from my church for like 9 years, and so that was my context growing up. And I don't know, like it is kind of funny because I think people look at me now, and especially people who have known me for a long time and might think that it's a weird trajectory to end up where I am now, like playing rock music with a bunch of queer people in like dingy bars, having gotten to that from like playing on worship teams. But for me, it doesn't feel that disconnected because it's still like I'm learning how to play with other people, trying to like evoke a certain response in the crowd. And like our band does a lot of crowd work, and so to me it like feels kind of natural. But yeah, I've always like loved writing music. Even when I was doing like the worship band thing, like I would write my own melodies and like just play around with it. Have always been inspired by like the singer-songwriter genre, among many others. But so that was kind of my start, and I never was just like taking it super seriously. When I went to college, I kind of was like, okay, I'm not focusing on this as a career, so I'm not going to like put all my time and money and effort into it. So I was still like jamming with people, and I was obviously still like writing, but I wasn't like focusing on it. And it wasn't until I moved back to my hometown after college, and I met other musicians, including Kat from Cat and the Hurricane, and that's what kind of sparked. I was like, here's some like songs I wrote, whatever, and they're like, these are really good, like we should do something. And so meeting Kat was a huge catalyst for me kind of getting back into it. And that was like 5 years ago. So then the last 5 years has been like a whirlwind of music stuff. But yeah, I don't know, it was certainly an interesting trajectory. I feel like I can say I've played music in almost every kind of venue that could exist, from like a sanctuary to like a coffee shop to like a park.
It's like a dive bar, right?
Yeah, right. It's like I don't know if there's a priest coming to talk afterwards or if someone's doing coke in the bathroom, but like either way, I'm here and I'm gonna play my instruments.
That's a perfect. I've never heard a better way of describing like a collection of the venues you can play at. A church or a dive bar where someone's maybe doing coke in the bathroom. That's about exact as diverse as it gets, right? But no, that's really interesting. Especially where did you go to school at, Benjamin?
So I did my undergrad. I went to school in Southern Michigan. It was a small college that was like a Christian college, but yeah.
Yes, and then you moved back to the Wisconsin area, get in contact with Cat, start Cat and the Hurricane, and I guess in general, like when you're writing music, whether I at least from looking at your Bandcamp, which I know isn't where everything is for solo stuff, as an example, you put out songs like a couple of years ago. I haven't seen something super recent from it, but whether it's the solo material or the band, which you play keyboards in and do some vocals in it, correct?
Yeah.
What kind of inspirations you have when it comes to music? Is there anything, there's a few things that I could speak to from the more overt Christian days that still, in my music endeavors, which now I do like new metal and metalcore and breakdowns and talk about left-wing politics, right? Like I could still state without a fact or without a doubt that without that kind of Christian influence I had, or the church influence in music that I had, I might not be able to do that now, which is really weird to think about, So does any of that still inspire you? And then what are some of the big influences you have when it comes to writing music and performing music?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely does. I think I feel similarly that as to what you just said, that I guess like growing up around music in the context that I did, I was something that I was drawn to, and I think this was really genuine, was that like people wanted to connect to something bigger than themselves. Now, I don't define that in the same way that I did back then, but I still do respect that like people want to find meaning. And so I think that's what music does for me too. And I just kind of like stripped away some of the maybe more performative aspects of it. Yeah. But I think I do draw a lot of inspiration in my solo stuff, especially. Like I use that as my journal in a lot of ways. And I haven't put out a lot of that stuff yet. It's mostly like home recordings on Bandcamp. I've got a lot of stuff that I do live that I've just never like recorded, or haven't yet, I should say. So a lot of that stuff is definitely me working out like sort of the religious stuff and using a lot of metaphors from that world. And then and so like for that it's very much like the singer-songwriter-y thing. But when I met Kat, I think that awakened something in me that I've found that I also really love, which is like arranging and producing and like taking a song apart. And I liked what you said at the beginning, that it's like, we try to connect with people and try to write things that have deeper meaning, but we're also trying to like have some kind of pop sensibility and like have a broad appeal to it. Yeah. So when Kat came to me, the first Cat and the Hurricane album came out in 2017. And it was very like indie folk kind of rock vibes and very acoustic. And when Kat and I met, they wanted to do the second project, and they're like, I want this to sound different. Like I want this to sound more poppy, or want to just like explore a broader range of sounds. And so my role in that was like, okay, you're giving me this song where you've written the lyrics, you've written the chords, but you want it to like explore different sounds. And so I got to help like pick apart all the different parts and like add in a bunch of keyboard stuff and bass stuff, and just, I don't know. I love taking the bones of a song and figuring out what can make it stand out. And Kat has written most of the lyrics and chords and stuff for most of the Cat and the Hurricane stuff, but we've started collaborating a lot more. Awesome. And I've gotten to write some stuff that's not out yet, but that kind of merges those two things, where I'm like, we're still drawing from my sort of background and influences, but bringing into, the genre that all of us kind of are in now. Yeah, absolutely. And, it makes a lot, it's kind of cool to be in both worlds, because I've done that as well, where, you might do a couple of music projects. One's your own kind of baby when it comes to like the lyrical content. Because like we all, I don't know. Some people are different. Some people like to just like really get into the music writing process. And I absolutely love that. Obviously, I don't know if you can see, but I've got all my guitars in the background and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like, I'm all about that. But like, I love writing lyrics, and like, it's really cool to write your own songs in the sense of what the words are and what maybe people get the meaning out of. But also it's cool in your instance with Cat and the Hurricane, which I've been a part of things like that too, where you're more of somebody that comes in and gets to, somebody, I'm guessing she maybe they come into, with like a very basic idea. Right. And then the other two members get to help put their perspective on it. And there's something really fun about that when I first started doing music, I always wanted to be the person that was like, no, this is the song, it's about this book I read when I was 15, or it's about this issue I care about, or whatever. But there's also such a fun aspect about like somebody comes to you with their idea and you get to put a whole new like texture onto it, right? Like that's still fulfilling in a really real way when it comes to music, right? Yeah, definitely. So
looking at when I get back over here and I'm looking at a little bit of some of the music that Cat and the Hurricane has put out. I know that, like you said, you've been a part of that group since you said 2017. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think end of 2017.
And you've done that. You've also done things like a podcast that had a few episodes in it that I listened to that I really enjoyed. I thought it was pretty informative in a lot of really cool ways, and still really entertaining. And then you've, like you said, done your own solo things. I also want to talk a little bit about, and we can kind of get into all these things branching off, but what, I've communicated with you a little bit through social media over the years. And what I found interesting, and I've had another episode on the show of somebody that is very devoutly Christian that I had on. It's a metal band called Silent Planet that their vocalist, went to school. Part of it was like learning theology and everything else. And yet is a very like left-wing progressive band that talks about issues. Like one of their songs was literally about like the whole rising issue in like 2019 of like trans homeless youth and like all these different things and like all this kind of stuff, and putting in the context still of their Christian beliefs. And that's what I found interesting with talking with you in the past, is like there's a lot of people like me, I think, that grew up in like a right-wing conservative, if you don't want to throw right wing on it, but conservative, evangelical church denomination or individual church or whatever, and they grow apart and they become an atheist or an agnostic and go left that way. And you're kind of like in that camp, which is very much what I became after, 18 years in the church, where when at least what I've followed from you from social media, when I've talked with you on some of these issues that you and I are pretty aligned on, you are still pretty, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still very connected into the Christian faith. And if I remember right, aren't you taking classes actually still in the realm of theology? And I don't know if it's seminary or if it's continuing classes or what, but
yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So
yeah, it's a seminary.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
so
and
I'm in it.
yeah, you're in it. There's plenty of people that have had pastors that didn't even go to seminary school. It's like
right.
The graduate degree for being a pastor, right? So I guess if you're open to talking about this, that's fine. If not, we can continue on and we'll talk about music and your drag performances and everything else. But I guess what started for you, if you can go back as far as you can, whether it's college or earlier or whatever, where you had your faith, you had the same denomination you and I pretty much still grew up in, and yet you begin to have these beliefs, whether it's with your own actual identity. I don't mean belief in that regard, but your own actual identity, or the certain beliefs you have now that would many people would consider maybe more left or more progressive or whatever buzzword you want to throw on it. Can you kind of point to a time where that growth happened for you and just kind of speak to that a bit? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's interesting too. And I appreciate you asking it in that way. And your initial pitch to me, I was like, ooh, this is exciting. Because I don't often get to like draw the lines from one thing to another, because I do feel like I wear a lot of hats, and like I'm always trying to be authentically who I am, but there are some ways in which I'm like the person I am in venue spaces and the person I am in drag spaces and the person I am at school. And for me, they're all the same person, but I understand other people like perceive them differently because of, but yeah. So I, as you said, like grew up in a conservative, I would call it right wing. It wasn't like my family especially is not like the way out there conspiracy theory right wing, but definitely their beliefs are, in that realm of conservatism. And for me, it's interesting because I think I've fluctuated a lot between those spaces. Like you said, a lot of people end up just like, becoming agnostic or atheist or leaving altogether. And I've like every other day I'm there. I change my mind every day, I feel like. But I went to, I went to college, and my undergrad degree is technically in pastoral ministry, which is a fun like trivia, but and worship arts. And so I was there, and it took me about like 6 months of being at college before I realized that I was queer, and that I realized like, oh, this is not a place that sees all of who I am. Like it took me 6 months tops, because I grew up so sheltered
Mhm.
that I just didn't know that there was other ways to be. And as soon as I went to college and met other people with like different life stories, even though it was still like the safest college I could have gone to because it was the same denomination as what I grew up in,
Right.
there were just other people there who had other life experiences to share. And I was like, oh shit, like I don't have to be this one thing. So that kind of happened right away. But then I was still closeted throughout college. I would like slowly come out to friend groups and things. And my senior year, I made a big deal to come out to like the administration. And that was fun. But throughout all of it, I guess I was still drawn to studying religion. And I think what clicked for me was like my senior year, I came out and I think I stayed out of spite at that point because I was like, I am not going to let these people define what it means to be like interested in religion and spirituality. And then I had some years where I was like kind of back and forth. And now where I'm at is like, I'm doing this graduate program, and it's not, and to be as brief as possible, there's like a lot of seminaries offer either MDiv programs, which is a Master of Divinity, which like is the qualifying degree to be a pastor or a priest or something. But a lot of them will also offer like an MA, just a Master of Arts. So that's what I'm doing because I want to like write and teach and do research. It's so funny because I'm at a seminary, and the last term paper I just finished for finals was like this 20-page paper about how evangelicalism is a cult. So I'm like,
I love it.
I'm like, I'm at seminary, and so people say that, and then I'm like, huh? I'm like, don't worry. I'm with you. Like, we agree on all the things that matter.
Well, it's just, it is interesting in the respect of like, and this is one of the reasons. It was actually after I had this conversation with this other band that I was talking about that I thought of actually contacting you, because I was like, I feel like we might have somewhat of a similar conversation in that, even recently in my own life, like I'm not dissuading on what I believe in. Like I don't believe in what I grew up with. Right. But my opinion has changed on what the problem is, I guess, because I used to view, whether it was, and a big opening moment for this was when one of my close friends in college kind of went back to his religion of Islam, and is, both he's a communist, and he's also devoutly Muslim. And when he kind of explained to me how that was, and then I had this conversation with, one of my favorite metal bands where the guy's a devoutly Christian, left progressive person, I thought of like who I know personally, and it was just, it came across with you because, there's been a lot of things in news that I've seen you talk about that I've also probably talked about or, yelled about is a more accurate description,
right.
Where you feel like you're at odds with that belief, but it's really not about your spiritual belief. It's about what you do with it and what you pull from and what the context is of like the scripture you're following and everything in between. It's really more about how you live your life for other people, right? Or your overall outlook. And so I know like you're talking a little bit about how you critique evangelicism, call it a cult, which I loved. I loved that was a paper you turned in seminary. But what, was there a moment for you, I guess, or where do you kind of wrestle with that, I guess, in a sense of like, are there still things, you talk about critiquing these things, are there still things that you legitimately pull from your spiritual beliefs on this stuff that like still resonate with you? And where do you think the dichotomy of that is? Do you think it's like, and this is a stupid kind of big heady question, but like, what do you think like the disconnect is there between what you value, how it kind of worked with your faith and how people somehow have that faith and have the opposite reaction? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of a mumbled question.
Yeah.
But
no, I think I get it. And like, I could talk about this for days, but
I'm here for it.
Yeah. No, I love it. And like, I think the one thing that I will say that I think answers your question is that for me, there's a lot of things about religion in general, not just Christianity, but religion that I can't get away from because I'm so fascinated by it. Like I have a very like sociologically minded brain.
Yeah,
like I'm just so fascinated by humans and how humans behave in groups, especially. And so like it was going to college, and especially in this graduate program, which is like a more progressive school. They're like a progressive Christian school, quote unquote. But like learning about other religions and learning about historical traditions of Christianity that aren't evangelicalism. Like I have had a history of Christianity class where we were talking about Egyptian Christians and Ethiopian Christians who were like had their own theologies and had their own ideas of what counted as like true orthodoxy that were completely different from what the Roman Catholic Church was saying. But what the Roman Catholic Church said ended up becoming like the universal thing. And so they're like, all of these African Christians are heretics and you have to, you know, acquiesce to what we believe. And like just learning about all these different traditions, it's like, oh, I've like been able to separate in my mind, at least for me, that it's like religion has been an influence in societies throughout history. And there must be a reason for that. Now, that doesn't mean like it's hard because I'm like, if someone asks me if I believe in God, I don't know how to answer that question. And the evangelicals would say, well, that means you're not a Christian. But for me, like the Christian tradition has been full of people who don't believe any of the things that evangelicals believe about. You must say this sinner's prayer and cry, and then you are in.
Yeah.
And then you can treat people however you want.
Where even is that? Yeah. Like,
that's like not, no, yeah. We made that up in like 1850. Right. Like, you know, I'm just like, I'm a history nerd too. So it's just like, I look back at all these previous expressions. I'm like, okay, there's something that in almost every culture, in almost every era, there's some kind of like communal spirituality or religion that means something to those people. So when I look at my own context, like being raised in Midwestern United States in the century that we're in, like, I know that I am shaped by Christianity, whether I want to be or not. Like that's just what shaped me. So I guess when I claim Christianity, I'm doing it more in like this is just a matter of fact, like the thing that has made me who I am. Do I believe that Jesus was a real person who died and raised from the dead? Probably not. Most days. I mean, it's possible weird shit has happened in the world, but
some could say weirder even, right? Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know. But also for me, that question, and this is where I'm going to be a heretic for anyone who does call themselves a traditional Christian and for some reason listens to this, but like, I don't think that question matters for me and for my own journey and my like journey as a person, whether or not Jesus was a real person that lived and died and whatever, like that just truly doesn't matter to me. I care about like how whatever you claim, whether that's Christianity or Islam or atheism, like that whatever you believe helps you be a kinder, more like better, more generous person.
Right.
So like, and that sounds cliche, but I'm just like, I care more about how what you believe impacts how you live, and that can be whatever you want it to be. Like, you know, I don't care.
I mean, I absolutely agree. I think, and that's kind of where like in, you know, like I said, in my own opposite trajectory on this stuff, that like I've come back around to that idea, because it's like, it's not like believing, you know, to me, it's not like believing or not believing in some specific thing anymore means you're innately, you know, where your morality or where your ethics lie, right? Because like, you know, you could see in real time. I mean, we could probably just Google news stories right now that would exemplify exactly what I'm talking about, right? So on any side of the spectrum. So like, it is, I think it's just like an interesting thing that like you can, you know, like you've done all this, you know, academic work in theology and everything in between. And, you know, I grew up in a lot of those things as well. And I've read so much on my own on the opposite end of the spectrum. And then you kind of just come back to this place of like, it just kind of matters if you're a piece of shit or if you're a good person, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's really funny how like all of that reading and all that education, and I'm not saying it's not pointless. What I'm saying is like, it can really kind of bring you more back to a simple truth, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, no, I found the same thing. And that's why even though when I'm at like a bar at a drag show or a concert or something and people are like, oh, what do you do? And I'm always like, okay, well, I am in seminary, and you know, their face. And I just have to be like, at the end of the day, we're on the, like, as long as we all come back to the same thing, that it's about ethics and it's about, you know, like how you move through the world. we're good.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I just like studying history and I like studying religion, but
of course,
yeah.
of course. And I think it probably takes there's no way to sum that up in like a 2-sentence small talk.
Nope. Literally no way.
Yeah. Well, you bring up your drag performing. I just wanted to ask, when did that start for you? When did it kind of, seem like something that was really like a, I honestly, to be blunt, I don't know obviously a whole lot about the intricacies of it, other than I think it's an amazing thing for people to do to express themselves. But where did that come from for you? And I know it's grown from a whole thing that you actually host a night. I don't know how often in Madison, right, and everything else. So kind of speak to when did that start for you, and where did that kind of come from?
Yeah. So I started performing as INVERTIA in 2019, but I first started like becoming a fan of drag like right when I left college. I like didn't know a whole lot about it, and one of the first friends that I made when I moved back home, because like I moved back home to my hometown after college, but all of the friends that I had in high school were not necessarily people that I wanted to like. I made a new group of friends because a lot had changed for me.
Yes.
And so one of the first friends that I made was a drag performer, is still a drag performer, and introduced me to like RuPaul's Drag Race and like all of these things, and we went to the bars, and so it was my first time really experiencing it. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool, like, again, all of these pieces for me are connected, because I was like, oh, I already like being on stage, like I already enjoy that, but it's like the fun of it, the draw of it for me was like you get to create your own character and you get to create your own personality. At least that's what it is for me. And so I don't know, there's a club in Madison that's kind of like my home bar that does drag like 5 nights a week, and it's just a super cool place that became kind of like a home and a community for me when I moved here. And they had a night that was like a open stage that was for like the drag version of an open mic night. And so I got my start doing that. And then obviously a pandemic happened. But yeah, now I've kind of gotten back into it over the last year or so, and I host a different form of basically that open mic type of show for newer performers on Tuesdays. And yeah, it's cool. It's a lot of fun. It's like just another way for me to like express myself on stage. And I don't know, again, creating an experience for an audience. That's, I feel like, the thread that runs through all of it.
So would you say circling it back to music a little bit, and I haven't asked too many people this question, but it's something I always think about because everybody always has a different answer when I talk to them, like not recording something. Is your favorite aspect of music the songwriting aspect, the production aspect of actually seeing a song come to life in real time, or the live performance aspect of it? Like what kind of like pulls you and gets you to keep doing original music, I guess,
Oh, that is a good question. I don't know if there's one that like stands out from the rest for me, because like all of them can get really tedious, like especially like I love the product, like I said earlier, I do love the production and putting a song together, but it can also be really tedious, and sometimes I'm not patient enough to be like, okay, we gotta send this back for one more go because something's not right, and then you're like, oh, maybe we try adding this other part, which is fun but can be exhausting. And same with performing. It's like there's nights that are amazing, and there's nights where it's like, oh, I wish I was in bed at 9 o'clock.
If not earlier.
A show at 9 o'clock.
If you're lucky. Right. Yeah, that's funny. No, yeah, I know. It's one of those things. I don't know, because it's so funny. Like I remember, I had never even thought about this, but I was listening to a music podcast not that long ago of like a band that's touring or whatever, and the guy was asked what the worst part about being in a band was, and he said making music videos. And I was like, yeah, that sounds terrible. That's a good one. Yeah. So you just never know, because like the production side of things can be fun, but when you're on like your 16th edit of some mix or you want to add something in, you're like, God damn it, like, can we move on? Like, we've heard this song so many times, I don't even care about it anymore, so but yeah, no, I totally get it. I guess one other thing I wanted to ask you in regards to with performances and everything, and again, you can tell me if this is, but I just find these conversations fascinating. Like, since you've been doing drag performances, since you've been, more out and open with yourself with time, with growing up in the community that you've grown up in, what has kind of, if you don't mind me asking, what has kind of the reaction been from people that you used to know? Was that a tough transition for you? And just kind of speak to the piece of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Ooh, that is.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. It's a good question. I don't mind at all. It's definitely changed over time. Now that honestly, I think the pandemic obviously was difficult for all of the things that ways it was for everyone. But I think being able to disconnect from the world for a bit and come back out into the world has definitely changed my perspective on like what's important. And I feel like I give far fewer shits about what other people think now than I did when I first was out and started performing. But I think that like at the beginning it was so okay, here's just like a short story, but it was so funny because when I first came out, I was like one of 3 people on my college campus that were publicly out. I had a group of friends and like a lot of us were like not super open with professors and the administration because they were conservative and had stupid rules. But in the like couple years after I graduated, I would get messages just like out of the blue from on like Facebook or Twitter or whatever from someone that I went to college with that I hadn't talked to since graduating. And every time I saw a name of like someone I wasn't super close to, I'm like, they are either messaging me to ask me how I justify being queer and Christian, or they are messaging me to come out to me as well.
Yeah.
And it was like once a month there would be a message and it was like a 50-50 flip of which one it would be.
Yeah.
And so many people, and like now I feel like everyone that I know that I went to college with is queer in some way, which is just funny. But yeah, so I don't know, that was like at the beginning, and now that more time has passed, I don't get that too much. And I kind of feel like everyone either went through a similar trajectory as me and you, and like I feel like a lot of people in our generation where like saw through some of the bullshit and was like, ooh, this is not good. And I just know a lot of people who move to the left every year of their life.
Yes.
And, like, so either they're that or people have like unfriended me and blocked me and moved on. There are still some people where I'm like, oh, I'll like every once in a while I'll see a name, I'm like, oh, we're still Facebook friends.
Yeah,
I wonder if you see what I post, and I wonder
maybe
how
it's buried
you feel
by the algorithm.
Like, are you praying for me? Like, what is
right? Like, are you following to kind of share to other people what's going on here? Like
right.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. But it kind of goes back to the point of like, I guess another question I have for you when it comes to theology and religion in relation to some of these topics, and also your kind of progressive views and everything, is there any like literary influences you've had that you've read? Obviously you've done a lot of academic reading on the subject, that you've read that kind of like opened your eyes to this kind of side of things in regards to like more progressive political ideology, different looking at with religious lens or anything of that nature?
Oh, definitely. Ooh, that's such a good question. I wish I would have made a list, because I could have given you a list probably. It's because I'm blanking right now. But I think it happened kind of in like stepping stones that each one felt safe. And then I eventually ended up where I was at, because there was like my first memory of like reading something that helped it all click was Rachel Held Evans, who was a progressive Christian who unfortunately passed away way too young. But she wrote a lot about like for the Christian world, but like, hey, you don't have to be homophobic just because you go to church. Hey, you don't have to be all these things. And so I read her books, and that was like the first moment where I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I've been thinking these things, but someone else is verbalizing them. And I had no idea that there was people writing about theology from like a leftist perspective when I was in college, because no one told me.
Right.
So I discovered that, and then that was a stepping stone to like discovering like political philosophy and like reading more of just like classics. Again, I'm gonna blank on all of the specific books, but Yeah, I don't know. I just like started really reading history and philosophy and things from a variety of perspectives and not just like Christian philosophy.
Yeah.
And that definitely was a huge factor. I mean, I'm a nerd, so like reading is like how I learn things about the world. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I could pinpoint something specific, but no, that's definitely been a huge part of it. I think it's just like seeing that there are many ways to view the world was like a huge eye opener for me, and that's what made it all fall apart.
Did that come from your undergrad like work at all, or did that come from just more like independent research? Because you're a nerd like me, and you just like to read stuff, you know.
That's a good. Okay, actually, that is a good question, because interestingly, a lot of it did come from undergrad, and there were professors that I had. I always liked to tell people specifically, like when I talk about the college that I went to, that it was specifically the staff and like administration that was deeply homophobic and transphobic and misogynist in all their policies. And there were certainly some professors who were on board with that, but there were a lot of professors who were just like, didn't agree, but they weren't super vocal about their opposition because it was a job.
Yeah.
And like, so I had a lot of professors, weirdly, like a lot of the more progressive folks were in the theology and philosophy department. So I had like professors who introduced me to like Judith Butler and Michel Foucault and like all these like philosophers, and they're like, you should read this. And they're like, now they're not Christian, so there's Christian like commentary on them, but here's this. And I was like, okay, but what they're saying is making sense to me.
Yeah.
And you know, so a lot of it actually was from things that I was like assigned to read in undergrad. Like I had a theology class where it was like 10 different ways of 10 different theological traditions that we studied throughout the semester. And the first few were ones that I had like grown up with. And then they're like, oh, and then there's also this one called liberation theology, which like comes from Latin America, where, you know, Gustavo Gutierrez is a Latin American theologian who used like Christian theology to fight against capitalism and like fight against oppressors and whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, we're just gonna breeze right past that. Like,
yeah, right.
Know, like that's just
there were revolutions based on Catholicism. People don't like to, you know,
right.
to talk about.
So I was like, oh, okay. So it was just presented as like, this is another tradition. I was like, wait, I have more questions about that.
Yeah, wait.
Like so then that was kind of like the snowball to doing my own kind of reading. But there was a lot of it that started from what I grew up in. I tell people all the time, like, so growing up in, you know, Methodism, like, specifically the Free Methodist Church started because people were not okay with like the hierarchies that were existing in the Anglican Church. And I always tell people that because I'm just like, it's in our history that you could be so good. Like you could be using that history to be like, our history is one of seeing where there's inequality and fighting against it. But instead, they just did that at the beginning and then kind of
they just kept things going the way they were. And yeah. Right. Yeah. Agreed. Oh, well, and you can see that, you know, I you know, if anybody listening to this is into religious conversations, I had a recent conversation with my friend Shabir, who went to Iran and saw a lot of different things in Iran, and he's, you know, again, a communist Muslim, and he talked about just like, you know, if you want to write off, you know, for the leftist side of things, if you want to write off religion entirely, you're writing off like so many important, like, you know, fights against capitalism, fights against like oligarchies and oppression, all those kinds of things that were literally centered on like the Catholic faith, like in Latin America primarily, right? Or you know, you can look to the Middle East and you can see where there were revolutions against like oppressive capitalist oligarchic regimes through Islam. You know what I mean? And like it's just like in a historical context, it's very important to see where like the communal aspect of those things played such a huge role that like if you didn't have it, like would they have gotten you know, the advances that they got, which is so contradictory for us because where we live, it feels like it's, you know, at least in the big scheme of things, unfortunately, with Christianity specifically, it comes off as the regressive aspect of the country, right? Like that's why you have, I think in this country and some European countries, you have so much of like the connection between being left and being atheist, right? Or being left and being like overtly theologian or anything like that, where it's like that's not how it is everywhere. So it's just really what's wrong here. Like what the hell is going on here other than that
Right.
that's making things terrible,
Right.
So it's just super interesting to read. So I could geek out about that all day as well. I don't know, have you ever this will be super interesting for everybody else listening, but have you ever listened to or read the books from like the Christian activist Shane Claiborne before?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say that was another one that like I don't agree with everything he says by any stretch of the imagination with like his actual ideologies, but like some of the things that he does believe in and that like they push for a whole commune they had literally in the United States and all these things.
Right.
It's just like super interesting to see between that and like the contrast of like the mainstream right-wing evangelical movement we've had in this country for at least the last 50 years, right?
Right. Yeah, no, Shane Claiborne was definitely one of those kind of similar camp to Rachel Held Evans where like now like they're not progressive enough for me to be on board. Right. But like from the context to the people they're speaking to, for Shane Claiborne's like big thing, I know he wrote a book about the death penalty, and I know he wrote a book about all these things where he was just like, what this doesn't make sense like with our tradition. And I don't know. It's like you said earlier, like we can be on different sides of the spectrum and all end up at a similar place if your goal is just like to see people treated with equality and like autonomy. Because I like, if you want to say, well, what does being a Catholic mean? What does Catholicism mean? Well, it means something different to the person who's using it as an excuse to like shoot people who come up to his house in rural Michigan versus what it means for someone in Cuba or like Iran or somewhere where it's actually a tool of resistance to the oppressor. And that doesn't negate the fact that like the Catholic Church globally has some issues.
Oh yeah, that is like the smallest. Like you said that so minimally,
yeah.
But I love it.
But it's like, no, I mean, like I care about what it looks like for you. So like, this is, to some of the work that I'm starting for a thesis that I have to write next year, but I'm interested, like evangelicalism specifically, since that's kind of the movement that I grew up in the United States is a tool of oppression. And at the same time, that doesn't mean there aren't people in other cultures at other places and times where similar belief systems were a tool against oppression. So it's like, again, goes back to, I care more about how you're using it. And I just think it's disingenuous for someone living in the United States to be like, yes, Christianity needs to be spread because it's a good thing. I'm like, you need to read the room. Like not here. Not here. Yeah,
but, at least not in the context of what it is currently, right?
Right.
But I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's the biggest point people need to drive home is like no one, you and I both just said like not that long ago in this conversation that like, it's about what you believe and all that, but like I don't even know if it's actually for me what you believe, it's what you do with that belief, right? Like
yeah,
you could have some belief that I don't agree with at all, but like if you're just out doing your own thing and not literally affecting anybody's life, that's one thing, but like that's not what happens, right? So what you're doing with what you claim to be the biggest level of moral hierarchy or philosophy or whatever word you want to throw with it, like if all you're doing with that is oppressing people or like trying to do regressive policies and not doing anything to benefit people, like, yeah, that's a problem. But that has nothing to do with like what someone believes, really. That's just policy and terrible evangelism. But I digress. Benjamin, thanks so much for coming on with me on this. I really appreciate it. I have one last question for you, and then we can kind of get into plugging whatever we can for you before this is done. But I've been asking everybody on this show, and like it's 50-50 if people love it or if people hate it, but I'm going to keep doing it because I'm an asshole. Say you're not in this band you're doing, saying you're not doing your solo stuff, or say you're doing your solo stuff and you're picking. Let's do it that way. You're doing your solo stuff, and you can pick literally any band member, living or dead, from any band you love, any artist you love, anything from any spectrum of music. What would essentially be your fantasy league all-star band lineup for your solo music? And you have to
Okay.
answer.
Whew.
I'm not gonna let you cop out. I've let
All
a
right.
couple people cop out, but you're by yourself in this. I'm not letting you cop out. You gotta come up with it.
All right, my all-star. Oh boy. Okay. I think, especially if it was like me doing my solo stuff with the vibes that I want to go for, I think I've always said that I would love to work with Jack Antonoff, because I feel like which I might change my answer in a year, because I feel like now everybody is on that train because he's like producing everybody's records.
Yeah.
But I love like, especially like the Bleachers stuff that he did, and Fun and like all of that. I mean, he plays everything, so maybe that'd be my keyboardist. I don't know.
There
But
you go.
Jack
Just have him play
Antonoff would be
everything.
cool.
Just everything.
Yeah,
You know?
there you go.
Yeah.
It's all pre-recorded.
Have like one of those just like a stack of instruments that they got. He's got to switch to like every song. It'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Oh boy. I don't know. This is so hard.
Here's the thing, though. You can just do it off the cuff, and you can regret your answers when you hear this when it comes out
There
in
you
like
go.
a couple
Okay.
weeks.
I'm gonna do like a musical collective. Jack Antonoff's gonna do all the pre-recorded beats. Gonna get Chance the Rapper in there.
Hell yes.
We're gonna have Haley Williams.
Perfect.
And we're gonna get Melissa Etheridge can play guitar. How about that?
Yeah, works perfect. Who's doing drums though?
Yeah, that's the one I've been like in the back of my head. I'm trying to figure out.
If you don't know their names, you can still say like the drummer of said band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's paying attention to the drummer, really? Am I right? No.
Right? Yeah, who knows drummers' names? I'm gonna say Josh Dunn. I'm gonna think of a better answer in like
But
an hour.
the episode I
I'm
put
gonna
out
say
this
Josh
week,
Dunn.
which by the way, like just plug for you, anybody that listens to this may have already heard the episode, but the episode I put out when we're recording this, the 19th one of it's the band OK Cool. I think you would love them. Like they're super, super good. If you haven't heard them already, but one of them picked one of them picked Josh Dunn as well for the drummer, and also picked Haley Williams for the vocalist. So there you go.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
No,
Just universally acclaimed people, though. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you can't go wrong with the drummer of 21 Pilots and the singer of Paramore. Like you just let alone her solo stuff. But I digress. Like so good. So yeah. Works perfect. So you said Joshua Dunn, you said Haley Williams, we said Chance the Rapper.
Yes.
And who'd you say for
Jack
guitar?
Antonoff. Melissa Etheridge. I don't know. It doesn't make sense genre wise, but
it doesn't matter.
See what she'll do.
It's your music. They're gonna just play what you write anyway.
That's
right?
true. That's true. Yeah. She's there for me.
Yeah. They're all there for you. They don't matter. It's just about you. No, just kidding. All right, so that's a great lineup. I love it. Very eclectic.
Yes.
So anyone that hasn't before, make sure to check out Cat and the Hurricane. You can check them out on Spotify. Check them out on Bandcamp. Check them out, on social media. Do you know what's the plug for Cat and the Hurricane specifically for social media?
Everything is Cat and the Hurricane, all one word. That's Cat with a K. I think Twitter's different because character limit. But yeah, Cat and the Hurricane all spelled out on pretty much everything.
Perfect. And then last thing, obviously you can plug where people can find you, I suppose, as well, right? If you want to do that. And then I always play a song at the end of this. You can pick one of the solo ones. You can send me something if you want to. Or you could pick Cat and the Hurricane song. So tell people where they can find you and what song you want to play.
Awesome. Yeah, so you can find me. I'm pretty much everywhere. My handle is Mix Benjamin Rose, MX Benjamin Rose, all spelled out. I also have a website. It's mixbenjaminrose.com, and I post all of the things I'm doing because I know I do a lot of different things with the drag and the music and everything. So that's kind of the hub for all of that. And then I do drag as INVERTIA, which is INVERTIA. And I have an Instagram profile for that as well. And the song, I feel like go with the classic and play Sorry That I'm Like This by Cat and the Hurricane. That's actually one of the first songs that I co-wrote lyrics for. So Cat and I collaborated on that one. And it's still very, very proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll play The song from what? Sorry, what was the title of it? I just want to make sure.
Sorry that I'm like this.
Sorry that I'm like this from Cat in the Hurricane. Benjamin, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you ever want to come back on and talk these things again, I'm always open to it. And thanks for your time, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.